Hello again, this is Luke Ranieri with my father Robert Ranieri, and we're talking about this painting, which is called Porta Gemina, the Twin Gates. And Papa, you painted this in 2004, right?
Right.
And this was painted about the same time as the last painting we looked at together, which was the Aula Nocturna. And I wanted to look at this one today because they bear some resemblance to one another in the sense that they have both a kind of a dichotomy, a dual sides, and they both have some interesting reflections. I called them minima and maxima last time, a large and a small repetition on both the left and the right. Could you tell us more about that?
Sure. Well, this actually is parallel or somewhat similar to the one as has been mentioned. And you can see now in the case of this one, this lighter area, which is more vaporous or let's say full of atmospheric effects. And it is similar to what happened on the other one, except that that condition occurred on the right. So this area, this half is much denser and full of articulation of architectural divisions and, say, interlocking of forms, the buckling, folding, and a sense of ascending, or you can think of the arch will go up and then come down again. And in the case of this one, the frame or the edge of the painting itself kind of will be equal to a supporting element. So there's that continuity all the way down. So this gives you the posture or the position of this particular form as having a very immediate frontal, character, which will confront the viewer more, whereas over here on the left, this has more of an ambivalent condition in that because this is framing a more vacuous or open area with this modified gray, the whole thing may recede. But still, again, because of my work, I'm interested in forms advancing or retreating alternatively, depending on how the viewer approaches and perceives the development of the space. So again, there's this struggle or contest, visual contest, to see how far forward the imagery will be. In certain cases, on a very large work, you'll find that the image is in front, somewhat in front of the picture plane, which is really a kind of I guess, a conceit or a desire to create a deeper space, even though the space is not formed in its depth with a linear perspective, like railroad tracks going into the depth.
Right. If I may add about these paintings, if the viewers are seeing your work for the first time in this video, I'll add that your work, as I understand it, principally inspired by our architectural forms. For example, in this painting, similar to the last one that we viewed, we see forms that are either the sections of a vault or a dome or an archway. That's what they seem to suggest. Here we have similar forms, and they're duplicated. The duplication of an archway as over a reflecting pool, perhaps, but not to be deliberate symbolism or an extraction from a real place, but rather using the beauty of those natural architectural forms in order to create a space that's completely in our imaginations, rather directly from your imagination.
That is true. And so then let's go to the left again here, and you can see that this form here, it's a kind of smaller arch, if you will, or even almost a dome, partial dome form because of the modeling that gives it a very volumetric thing. Whereas by comparison, the strong linear arcing form drawn in with a larger brush tends to flatten that, whereas the modeling here gives it a full dimensional aspect. And yet within that, you have the reoccurrence of the linear emphasis of one broad, say, dark line, quasi-black, and here again. So it can be seen more graphically like a letter.
Yeah.
So there's that contest, or say interlocking of what can be seen as flat, although even though it's flat, there's this atmospheric effect, which is enhanced somewhat by this lighter arcing. So there's a fluid, say, a development of this very pale form, and interrupted by a quasi-volumetric intercession, and then again back to almost a fluid, but rather flatly, not a forcibly modeled three-dimensional form. And then, of course, there are a couple of floating marks. Most of this has been part of, say, a thought process where things were started, and then the resulting idea was to simplify that, keeping just a couple of marks that may be hovering or embedded in what is a rather fluid condition.
Right. Well, that's as you already mentioned today, that's what makes, I think, one of the most particular, unique parts of your style, and that is what you're trying to do for us as the viewer, is to create a space that I think goes beyond traditional 3 dimensions. Nevertheless, that's a space which we can inhabit. And also, by looking at it, we aren't certain what is in front or behind, and that's exactly the goal. The goal is to create a sense that, as you were just pointing out to these 2 smaller forms, I believe you've called these before in other works something akin to music notation on a page, or you've made that reference, just in the sense that those forms on a musical page of sheet music are lovely. They're beautiful. I love how sheet music looks as well. You and I like to sing.
That is true.
And so we have that appreciation for the form and for the shape of them. Here again, they're seen in the blue, looks like a gateway. I'm going to call it that, since the name of the painting is Porta Gemina, Twin Gate. And is the twin gate, there's a good question, is the twin gate, of course, the fact that there are 2 halves here, both of the gate, is it that this particular one is a dual portal, or it appears to be a dual portal? Is the blue some kind of form that's in front or behind of the orange? Is the orange in front or behind? Is the gray, light and gray outline around it in front or behind? I just find it endlessly fascinating and pleasing to look at, in particular also then this green, the green with the corbelling. They look like square, hexagon, octagon forms that are around there, similar to, and that can be seen in a dome. Right. And then one wonders what one is looking at, not for the purpose of solving a mystery, but in order to experience the pleasure of that. At least that's my assessment and my interpretation from what I've learned from you so far. What else could you say about the very stark contrast between the 2 halves?
All right. Well, and this section, of course, is part of the pivotal nature that we're having to deal with here. And there's an area here which is more heavily built up, both in terms of the more certain aspects of it, the amount of paint that's been layered in, and also the staggered and interlocking of what seems to be architectural structures. And of course, these are, I think, important because they are in opposition or in contrast as a vocabulary of the rectilinear as against the curvilinear that we have in the wings, or on the extreme left and extreme right.
Right.
So it's a transitional mode of forming this interruption. It could be like a staging, if you will, between the 2 halves and the 2 entries and exits. And of course, then there's a kind of a resolution in a more atmospheric or say activated shape, almost the heat of the, say, flame-like in terms of the gesture, because the brush allows certain things to happen. You can do a kind of a stippling and or a blending activity with the brush with less paint, and then with more paint you have an impasto and deliberate say sense of each stroke as it comes up and fills this triangular form, and then here again. So you can see this as one, or then of two, like a diamond shape, and then it's interlocked. And in general, if you are going from top to bottom, you can do a kind of staircase kind of descent. Then here there's this other form which also intercedes, and whether this cool gray form is behind that on the left, or because of this buildup of faceting, it's in front of that, and it begins to compete with what this space is in terms of its location and space. And then, because we have made a big deal about entry or exit, we have to look at this. Now this is balanced on the very bottom edge of the painting. Does that mean that it is the most frontal of all of this? Or we may have this as an intermediate, somewhat back from the space, and the atmospheric effect of that cool gray has it come out with a potential to have a kind of resonating body, or a sense of a solid, if you will.
Right.
But again, diffused, there's a kind of horizon line there, so this breaks into the autonomy of a single shape, and then one has to deal with if this is this deeper than this, and so forth. So that kind of dual characterization prolongs the viewer's opportunity to get varied interpretations of the work as it progresses, and as the viewer revisits what the artist may have intended. So the complex of the artist's thought, and then the viewer has an opportunity to, with this viewing process, to interpret according to that viewer's momentary insight or discovery and a final resolution, and say, well, I think I've gotten all that I can for now, and maybe tomorrow I'll get more.
And apropos, we'll pause there for today. Grazie, Papa. Thank you. And for those of you who are interested in seeing more, go to robertranieri.com.
Thank you.